and institutions who have a stake in companies' decisions, which is typically known as stakeholders engagement. Further, we will also connect this to the investor relations, how companies communicate with investors and capital markets in a transparent, consistent, and governance aligned way. Okay, so let's see what we will cover today from a stakeholder engagement perspective and investor relations. So first, we will start with understanding stakeholders, who they are, types of stakeholders, what they expect from the organization, and how they impact the organization's success. Secondly, we will move to the stakeholder engagement, the process, the step-by-step framework, and the specific role of the board in overseeing engagement and balancing interest. Third, we will look at the global regulatory framework on stakeholder engagement, standards and best practices such as global reporting and responsible business guidelines that expect companies to systematically identify and engage with the stakeholders. And finally, we will focus on the investor relations. So who is an investor? What are investor relations? Its regulatory framework in different jurisdictions, and how the board should govern this critical function. So by the end of this session, you should be having a clear view of how stakeholder engagement and investor relations together support sustainable and long-term value. Okay, so before we jump into the concepts, let's do a small quick activity. So learners, think of one organizational decision you are familiar with. It could be policy change, project launch, compliance update, process change, CSR initiative, or maybe something else that comes to your mind. So think about that decision and then just think which stakeholder or maybe stakeholder group can be affected by that decision. So learners, can we have the responses? ESG compliance, plant operations. Okay. Anil, ESG compliance, which stakeholder can be impacted through ESG compliance?
Well, typically, Bhavya, ESG is all about environment, social, and governance. So I think from a plant perspective, especially if it's a manufacturing industry, the environmental concerns certainly play a role there because plant have a lot of operations. They have to take into consideration a lot of requirements from an energy perspective. There could be discharge of pollutants sometimes. So that also that need to be taken care of. So if the organization is moving significantly on the ESG policies, then there could be a direct impact the way in which the plant need to adhere to those new policies in place.
Okay, so maybe we can say that stakeholder group which can be impacted from ESG, maybe society at large.
Yes, so absolutely. So one is society at large, and also I believe the community, the employees as well, right?
The
Within
community, the employees as
within
well.
the plant.
Correct, correct,
Yes.
correct. So we have more responses. Policy change, yes, definitely it will impact the employees. Then policy change may impact all stakeholders, yes. Then CSR initiatives, correct, Vijay, it will impact society at large. Remote working policy, perfect, Nilesh, very nice. Yes, employees, it will impact employees. So, great responses, learners. So, the idea is to see that almost every decision in an organization touch maybe more than one stakeholder, sometimes in a ways that we don't even realize, immediately recognize. So, now let's discuss our first building block, which is understanding these stakeholders. Okay, so learners, I'll start with an example. So suppose you have started a company. So at the beginning, it feels like the business belongs only to you. But very soon you will realize that your decisions start affecting many other people. When you hire employees, their livelihood and growth depend on the company. When investors put money into the business, their returns depend on how responsibly the company is running. When customers buy products, their safety and satisfaction are linked to your decision. When you operate in a city, the local community and environment are also impacted. So, anyone who is affected by the company's decisions or can influence the company's success becomes a stakeholder. So, in other words, we can say that stakeholders are people or groups who have something at stake in how the business operates. So, as we understand what is stakeholder, we can see that not all stakeholders are positioned in the same way. Some are closely involved in running the company every day, while others are outside the organization, but still they have the strong influence. So those who are closely involved within are called internal stakeholders. These include employees, management, board, shareholders. They are the part of the organization's daily operations or maybe decision making. Their actions shape the company's culture, ethics, and risk taking behavior. So, if internal stakeholders are aligned and engaged, the company functions smoothly. But if they're not, problems start, from the inside the organization. And then on the other hand, there are stakeholders who exist outside the formal boundaries of the company. These are external stakeholders such as customers, suppliers, regulators, financial institutions, media, local communities. So they may not be working inside the company, but yes, they have influenced how the company is trusted, regulated, and supported. They play a key role in giving the company its license to operate. So good governance is not about is actually about understanding both internal and external stakeholders and balancing their interest wisely. So let me share a quick fact with you. So the word stakeholder did not come from any law or regulation. It actually first appeared in the early 1960s in an internal research memo by Stanford Research Institute. And at that time, companies were struggling to understand why focusing only on shareholders was not working in the long run. Then, in later 1980s, a professor named R. Edward Freeman popularized this idea by saying something very simple but powerful. He said that a company cannot succeed if it only serves shareholders and ignores everyone else who is affected by its decision. So, this thinking slowly changed how boards and leaders looked at the companies. So, business started realizing that employees, customers, communities, regulators are actually not outsiders. They are the part of the system that allows the company to survive and then grow. Next is emerging stakeholders. So as we understand who stakeholders are, let's take the same company example, but one step further. So suppose your company is no longer smaller, it is growing across cities, countries, maybe even continents. So you realize that the stakeholders you were dealing with earlier are no longer the only ones who matter. New stakeholders start emerging, not because you invited them, but because the world around your business have changed. For example, earlier you were mainly dealing with the local regulators, but today, as soon as your business is growing, crossing the border, or handling the global data, international bodies start influencing you. Organizations like United Nations, WTO, EU, ILO begin setting expectations on labor standards, data protection, or climate action. So even if your headquarters are in one is in one country, their standards affect how you operate globally. So these bodies don't run your business, but they shape the rules. Then at the same time, like the nature of the investors have also changed. Earlier investors primarily asked one question: how much profit will I make? So today, a large and a growing group of investors evaluates companies based on environmental, social, and governance performance. These ESG focused investors look at how sustainable your business model is, how ethical your leadership decisions are, and how responsibly risks are managed. They influence their actually influence goes far beyond the capital. They can push companies to change the strategy, leadership behavior, and long-term priorities. Now, think about your supply chain. Your company may outsource manufacturing, logistics, or services to different locations. The workers in those outsourced or offshore facilities may not appear on your company's payroll, but their working conditions, safety, wages are increasingly linked to your reputation. So, if something goes wrong in your supply chain, the accountability does not stop at the vendor. It may come back to you. So, this is why supply chain workers and partners have emerged as a powerful stakeholder group globally. And finally, consider the digital world. Today, your company operates not just in a physical markets, but also in the online spaces. So social media users, digital communities, and influencers can shape public opinion within a short period of time. Even widely shared reviews or online campaigns can influence your brand perception more rapidly than many traditional channels do. So these digital communities may no may does not have a formal authority, but yes, they do have the visibility, they have voice and the speed, which makes them extremely robust stakeholders. So what we are seeing here is that stakeholder influence is expanding. It is no longer limited to those who sit across the table from you. It now includes international bodies, value driven investors, invisible supply chain workers, and highly vocal digital communities. So, boards and leaders must recognize these emerging stakeholders early because ignoring them often leads to governance, reputational, and strategic risk later. Okay. So, as we understand who stakeholders are, we let's address a very common and a very important confusion: the difference between the shareholders and stakeholders. Let's go back to our company story again, but this time from a boardroom lens. So suppose you are raising a capital from the investor. These investors own a part of the company. They have provided the financial capital, and in return, they expect economic returns. This specific group is what we call shareholders. So their relationship with the company is defined by the ownership and law. They vote, they invest, and they expect value creation. So, as explained in earlier slides, also, shareholders are not separate from the stakeholders. They are actually one of the category within the broader stakeholder ecosystem. In other words, we can say every shareholder is a stakeholder, but stakeholders are not limited to the shareholders. This distinction is very critical because confusion between these two ideas has actually shaped the corporate decision making for decades now. So, traditionally, companies operated under a concept known as a shareholder primacy. Under this thinking, the main purpose of the corporation was to maximize shareholders' value. Directors and senior executives were viewed as the agents of the shareholders with a fiduciary duty to act primarily in their financial interests. So decisions were judged successful if they increased the profits or share price, even if other interests were indirectly affected. But over the time, this approach began to show its limitations. Companies that focused only on short term shareholder returns often ignored risk related to employees, customers, society at large. So these risks that eventually came back as a reputational damage or regulatory action or maybe a financial loss. So this led to a gradual but an important shift in the thinking, and this shift is actually called stakeholder capitalism. So, under this approach, companies are expected to create value not just for the shareholders, but in a way that considers the broader ecosystem they operate in. Importantly, this does not dilute the shareholders' value. In fact, the idea is that long-term shareholders' value is better protected when companies responsibly manage a stakeholder's interest. In fact, this shift is not just theoretical. In some jurisdictions, it has been formally recognized in law. For example, in UK Companies Act, directors are now required to consider the interest of employees, communities, and the environment when making the decisions. So this reflects a clear evolution in how corporate purpose and board responsibility are understood globally. Now let's have another quick activity. Learners, imagine that you are sitting in a boardroom and the board is discussing the risk, not the financial risk alone, but the risk that arise when certain stakeholders are ignored or poorly engaged. So on the screen, you will see a simple sentence. Ignoring the following stakeholder group could lead to dash risk. So you need to fill the risk with respective stakeholders. The first one is the digital community and online activists. So what can be the risk for the company if this stakeholder group is ignored? You need to tell about the primary risk, the first risk that comes to your mind. Reputational, okay. Reputational, okay. Uh, Next is investors. This one is easy. Financial and capital risk, okay. Next is supply chain workers and partners. Operational risk, okay. Next is regulators. Reputational as well as operational, okay. Legal risk, okay. And the last one is local communities and society. Closure risk, okay. Reputation, inadequate capital risk, supply chain risk, okay, brand image. Learners, I must say 100% correct answers. Kirat, could you please show the answers? So yes, with the digital communities and online activists, there is a reputation or a brand risk. Then with the investors, if we ignore the investors, the risk shift to the financial losses. Then we have supply chain workers and partners. There is a operational disruption risk. For regulators, there is a regulatory exposure or legal exposure. Then we have local communities and societies. If they are ignored, company faces reputation or regulatory risk. So the key takeaway from this activity is each stakeholder group is directly linked to a specific category of risk. When boards or leaders proactively engage with the stakeholders, they are not being idealistic. They are managing risk in a smarter and a more sustainable way. Okay, so let's discuss the second block of the building, which is the stakeholders engagement. So, learners, stakeholder engagement simply means staying connected with the people who matter to the business. It starts with identifying who your key stakeholders are, then understanding what they expect from the company, and finally involving them when decisions affect them. It is not a one time activity or a formal meeting done once or annually in a year. It is an ongoing process of listening, communicating, and responding. An important thing is to remember is that it is a two-way communication. It is not only about the company sharing the information, it is also about hearing their concerns or maybe feedbacks. So when companies regularly talk to their employees, customers, investors, regulators, or maybe community at large, they are building the confidence over the time, And this confidence becomes valuable when company faces challenges. Now let's look at why stakeholders engagement matters to the company. So the first reason is trust and reputation. When companies regularly engage with the stakeholders, explain their decisions clearly, and listen to feedback, trust builds over the time. This trust becomes extremely valuable during the difficult situations such as crisis. Stakeholders are more likely to support or give time to companies they trust. Then we have better decision making. So when leaders and boards understand stakeholder expectations early, decisions become more practical and realistic. Engagement brings Engagement actually brings real world perspectives into the boardroom and helps avoid decisions that look good on paper but fail in the execution. Then we have the risk management. So many risks do not appear suddenly, they give early signs through stakeholders. Maybe ignoring employees, customers, regulators, or communities often leads to a bigger problems such as strikes, compliance failures, reputational damage, or maybe a regulatory action. So stakeholder engagement helps identify and manage these risks before they turn into the crisis. The fourth is long term sustainability. Sustainability is not about the policies or the reports, it is about how a company treats people and society over the long term. Strong stakeholder engagement supports ESG goals by ensuring responsible business practices, social acceptance, and long term value creation. Let me give you one simple example. So, imagine a company planning to change employee work policies or introduce long working hours to meet the deadlines. So, if a company simply announces the decision without discussion with the employees, then employees may resist, their morale may drop down, attrition rate may increase. But if the company first speaks to their employees, understands their concern, explain business realities, and make adjustments based on the feedback provided by the employees, the same decision may be, some in a modified form will be actually accepted by the employees. So this is stakeholder engagement in action. So, in summary, we can say that stakeholder engagement is not optional today. It directly impacts trust, decision quality, risk management, and long term sustainability. So, for boards and management, engaging with the stakeholder is the essential part for running a responsible and successful business. Okay. Now, let's understand how stakeholder engagement actually works in a practical way. So engagement does not happen automatically. It follows a clear processes, and companies that do it well are usually very structured in their approach. So learners, these are the 7 steps in the slide. These steps are not coming from any regulation. These are the steps which are generally accepted by the company. This is not coming from any regulations. These are generally followed by the companies. So, Kirat, we can go to the next slide and we'll explain each step in detail. So, first is stakeholder identification. So, identification of stakeholders simply means determining which stakeholders are relevant to your company. So, in a company, stakeholder identification means identifying all individuals or maybe groups who affect the businesses or affected by it. This includes people inside the organization, like employees, and people outside the organization as well, like customers, suppliers, or maybe regulators. So, when stakeholder identification is done properly, there are several benefits which follow. Like companies are able to anticipate risk early instead of being surprised later. They can plan engagement in advance rather than reacting under the pressure. This also helps to avoid crisis driven responses and strengthen the company's position in the market. But when stakeholder engagement is weak, the risks are serious. Company may face regulatory non-compliance, loss of investor confidence, employee disengagement, or maybe a reputational damage. So very often these issues does not arise because decisions were bad, but because the right stakeholders were not identified early enough. So now, next question comes is how we should actually identify the stakeholders for our company. So the first step is brainstorm and create a broader list of these stakeholders. So at this stage, the goal is not to be perfect or selective, but to be inclusive. Companies should ask a simple question: who can affect our businesses, or who can be affected by our businesses? So this includes internal stakeholders as well as the external stakeholders. So it is better to start with a long list rather than missing some important group of the stakeholder at the beginning. Next step is to review existing documents and information within the organization to identify the stakeholders. So many stakeholders are already reflected in the company records, even if they are not formally labeled as stakeholders. So this may include contracts with the suppliers, customer agreements, investor communication, regulatory filings, licenses, ESG reports, risk registers, employee policies, or maybe board papers. So reviewing these documents help ensure that no critical stakeholder group is overlooked and also provides the insight into how the company currently interacts with them. The third step is actually asking the key questions about each stakeholder identified. This step helps refine the list and understand the relevance. So, companies should ask questions like who depends on our business for income or services? Who can influence our operations, approvals, or maybe reputation? Who will be the most impacted if we change our strategy, policies, or operations? Who can create risk or opportunities for the company? So these type of questions help separate stakeholders who are closely connected to the business from those with the minimal impact, and they bring the clarity on why each stakeholder matters. Next is consult and engage. You need to engage internally as well as externally. So, stakeholder identification should not be done in isolation by one team or maybe one function. So, management can speak to business heads, HR, compliance, risk team, or maybe operational team to understand who they deal with regularly. In some cases, company may also engage directly with external stakeholders such as key customers, suppliers, or maybe community representatives to understand their concerns and influence. So, this step often reveals hidden or emerging stakeholders that may not appear in the documents, such as informal community leaders or maybe the digital influencers. And the final step is to use the tools and frameworks to organize and categorize the stakeholders. So once stakeholders are identified, companies should group them based on their factors like influence, impact, interest, and their risk. We will also, learners, we will discuss about these tools in upcoming slides also. So, using the tool and framework step turns a long list of names into a clear, actionable stakeholder map that can be used by management and board for the decision making. So, in summary, we can say that stakeholder identification is not about creating the checklist, it is about understanding the people and groups connected to the businesses so that the engagement can become proactive, meaningful, and effective rather than reactive. Next, okay. So, as we understand why stakeholder identification it's actually not just the practice, it's about a global expectation. So, across the world, leading frameworks and regulations clearly require companies to identify their stakeholders in a structured way. For example, global reporting standards expect companies to systematically identify stakeholders as part of sustainability reporting. OECD guidelines encourage proactive identification as a part of responsible business conduct. Then in Europe, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive requires companies to identify stakeholders through something called double materiality, which means understanding who is affected by the company and who can influence it. Then we have UN guiding principles focusing on identifying people whose rights are affected by the business activities. In India, as well, there is a SEBI's BRSR framework and the national guidelines on responsible business conduct clearly expect listed companies to identify and clear and consider the interest of key stakeholders such as employees, customers, suppliers, investors, regulators. So this message across all these framework is consistent. Stakeholder identification is not optional. It is the starting point of the engagement, risk management, compliance, and long-term sustainability. So second step is the process of stakeholder mapping and the prioritization. Okay. So as we have identified who are our company stakeholders, the next challenge is we cannot engage everyone in the same way. Some stakeholders have more influence, some are more impacted, and some require immediate attention. So this is where stakeholder mapping and prioritization becomes very important. So, what stakeholder mapping actually means? So, stakeholder mapping and prioritization is a structured process used to analyze and prioritize individuals, groups, or entities that can affect or influence companies' decisions. It helps organizations move from a simple list of stakeholders to a clear understanding of who matters most, when, and why. The purpose of this exercise is to ensure that engagement efforts are focused, effective, and aligned with the organization's strategic objective. So instead of spreading time and resources equally across all the stakeholders, companies can focus on the right stakeholders at the right time with the right level of the engagement. But why this is critical today? So in today's environment, stakeholder expect transparency, responsiveness, and accountability. And at the same time, the risk of ignoring or misjudging key stakeholders are actually significant. A single dissatisfied stakeholder group can disrupt the operations, may damage the reputation, or delay your strategic plan, your company's strategic plan. So, stakeholder mapping helps organization anticipate these risks rather than reacting to them after the damage has already occurred. Now, this brings us to the need for the tools. So, tools are practical methodologies that help companies visualize and categorize stakeholders based on different attributes such as power, interest, influence, or urgency. So, without these tools, stakeholder prioritization becomes subjective and maybe inconsistent. So let's see what are these tools. The first one is the power interest matrix tool. So this tool maps stakeholder based on two dimensions: their power to influence the organization and their level of interest in the organization's activities. So stakeholders with high power and high interest require close and continuous engagement, while those with low power or interest, they may need specific periodic communication. So this metrics help organization decide how closely each stakeholder needs to be managed. The second tool is influence impact metrics. This is actually similar to the power interest metrics, but they more focuses on the change and the consequences. It looks at how influence a stakeholder has over a decision or a change and how much they are impacted by that decision. So this tool is actually used when there is a policy change, when there is a restructuring, or maybe ESG initiatives are going to be taken by the company. So where certain stakeholders, may be heavily impacted even if they do not traditionally hold the power. Then we have stakeholder salience model. So this model evaluates stakeholders based on three factors. control, lawful, and urgency. Control refers to the stakeholders' ability to influence decisions. Lawful refers to whether their involvement is appropriate or rightful, such as regulatory, contractual, or moral claims. Then we have urgency. Urgency refers to how quickly the stakeholders' issue needs attention. Stakeholders who possess all these three attributes are the most critical and require immediate focus from management and the board. So, learners, we have one illustration on the power interest matrix. Um, so this matrix has two dimensions, power on one side and interest on the other side. Power refers to how much influence a stakeholder has over the company, and interest refers to how much they care about or are affected by the company's decisions. So stakeholder with high power and high interest fall into the managed closely category. These are people like key investors or maybe major regulators. They need active engagement and involvement in important decision making. Then we have stakeholders with high power but low interest. This group should be actively consulted. For example, government agencies. They may not need a daily involvement, but they must be kept informed and whenever necessary, consultation is required with these type of stakeholders. Then we have stakeholders with high interest but low power, like our employees or maybe local communities. These groups, should be kept informed, but they should have a regular updates and opportunities to give feedback to the companies. And finally, the stakeholders with low power and low interest fall into the monitor category, such as public at large. They should not be ignored, but they do not require they require intensive engagement. I'm sorry, but they do not require the intensive engagement. So this metric shows one important idea very clearly. Stakeholder engagement is not one size fits all model. Different stakeholders need different level of attention, and mapping helps companies to engage their time and resources smartly. So next we have the third step, which is the stakeholder expectations. So learners, let me ask you one question. If you are on the board, which stakeholders' expectations would you want to understand first and why? Government regulations. Can we have the reasons also? Nimesh, Nilesh? Why government regulations or maybe investors are the first one? So these are key stakeholders and affect the business decisions. Okay. Learners, can we have more responses, please? High power, low interest. Government stakeholders may not be appropriate for all industry sectors. Example, the companies that are into defense industries or banks or government has keen interest in these companies. Yes, yes, Anil, correct. This will be sector specific or maybe company specific, which could make or break a business. Okay, Nimesh, got it. Then investors influence the key decisions. Okay. So, yes, interesting perspective, learners. Now let's look at the stakeholder expectations in a more structured way. So the next critical step is understanding the stakeholder expectations. So identifying stakeholders tells us who matters, but understanding expectations tells us what matters to them. So every stakeholder has certain expectations from the organization. These expectations may relate to performance, communication, or maybe some specific outcomes. If these expectations are not understood clearly, Even well-intentioned decisions can lead to the dissatisfaction or maybe the conflict. So that is why understanding stakeholder expectations is not about assumptions. It is about actively trying to see the organization from the stakeholders' point of view. So this is important because when boards and management clearly understand stakeholder expectations, they are able to anticipate risk much earlier. Instead of reacting after a problem arises, they can see warning signals in advance. So it also helps align business strategy with the stakeholder priorities. When expectations are understood, decisions are more balanced and realistic. Over time, this protects long-term value, shareholders' value, and overall enterprise value also. So on the slide, you can see few examples of the stakeholders such as customers, employees, regulators, communities with their expectations. These are the examples which shows that expectations are different for each stakeholder group. And that is why, as I said, a one size fits all approach will never work. But so how do companies actually understand these expectations? So they use simple but effective methods like surveys, questionnaires for a structured feedback, interviews and focus groups for deeper insights, social media monitoring to track public sentiment, and feedback forms for continuous stakeholder input. So these tools help organizations move from a guesswork to a real insight. But what is the role of the management here? While the board oversees this process, the responsibility of execution largely lies with the management. Management use a mix of data collection methods to get a complete picture, not rely on just one source. They must also ensure confidentiality wherever needed so stakeholders feel safe while giving the honest feedback. Then another important point is segmentation. Management should not ask everyone the same questions. Stakeholders need to be segmented so questions and analysis are relevant to their specific context. This makes the insights more meaningful and actionable. So the key takeaway is understanding the expectation is not about pleasing everyone. It is about making informed, balanced, and responsible decisions. Kiran, can we go to the next slide? Okay, we have one more short activity. So learners, on the left side, you will see stakeholder group, and on the right side, you can see different possible expectations numbered from 1 to 6. So your task is to match each stakeholder group with the expectation that you think matters most to them. So first is customers, then we have employees, regulators, investors or shareholders, communities, suppliers or partners.
Okay.
You can give
Okay.
all answers together.
Oh, we okay. Do we need to go one by one or we can just
No, you
start?
can give all the answers together and then we can discuss it. What can be the correct answer?
Yeah, for customer, I think the option will be three.
Which is high
Oh,
quality of products value. Yes,
right.
correct.
For employees, it would be
Okay, we are
second.
getting the answers in the chat box also.
Okay.
Let's see. Yes, Sandeep, you can still give the answers. That is
Yeah, so employees
all
would
good.
be uh, B, employees will be option number two.
Fair
For
compensation, job security, career
yes.
growth. Okay.
Yeah, for regulator, it will be compliance with the laws, ethical conduct, and timely disclosures. Same can go for Investors and stakeholder option 4, stable return, transparent reporting, long-term value creation. For community, it will be option 5, environmental protection, local employment, and social responsibility. Supplier, it will be option 6.
So learners, you agree with Sandeep? Okay, we are getting the thumbs up and we have the answers in the chat box also. Yes, correct. So Kirat, let's see what are the answers. So yes, customers are best matched with the expectation number 3, high quality products, value for money, timely delivery, responsive services. Then employee aligns mostly closely with the expectation number 2, fair compensation, job security, career growth, positive work environment. Then regulators match with the compliance with the laws, ethical conduct, timely disclosures. Regulators are actually less concerned about the profits. They are more focused on whether the company follows the rules responsibly or not. Then we have investors and shareholders, stable return, transparent reporting, and long-term value creation. Communities at large, yes, they are expecting environmental protection, local employment, and social responsibility. Suppliers and partners align with the expectation number 6, which is fair contracts, timely payments, and long-term value collaboration. So the key takeaway from this activity is that different stakeholders care about different things. If company assumes that everyone values the same outcomes, they will miss critical expectation. Okay, so next, the fourth step is engaging with the stakeholders. Uh, Let me start with an example. So imagine a large healthcare company facing a serious product safety issue that begins to affect public confidence. The company has two clear options. One option is to focus on the short-term profits and manage the issue quietly. The other option is to place stakeholders' safety first, even if that means recalling the product at a significant financial cost and admitting uncertainty. So the leadership chooses the second path. They communicate openly with with the customers, with the regulators, with the healthcare professionals, and wider public. They act early before the pressure builds. That choice does not make the problems disappear over the night, but it is going to preserve the trust. And that trust allows the organization to recover, stabilize, and retain long-term credibility. So this example helps us understand what engaging with stakeholders really means. Learners, can you hear me? Kirat, Yoshida, can
Yeah,
you
yeah,
hear me? Okay.
we can hear you.
Yeah. So this examples helps us understand what engaging with stakeholders really means. It is not about running meetings or issuing press releases. It is about how an organization behaves when stakeholders are anxious or maybe affected or maybe watching closely. And that is why stakeholder engagement must be guided by the clear principles. So these are the 10 principles. So the first one is to communicate transparently and have a consistent communication, engage early with the stakeholders, then acknowledging different perspectives you receive from the stakeholders, then adopt a structured and a proportionate approach. Then we have important principle, which is acting timely and decisively, which we just discussed in the example. Then stakeholder engagement is also deeply connected with the risk management. Good engagement helps surface these risks early. Then boards must also balance competing interests because what benefits one stakeholder group may concern another. Further, it should not be vague, it should be goal oriented. And further, like, engagement requires a clear ownership and accountability. Stakeholders must know who is responsible for what. Engagement only works when someone owns the outcome. And finally, by applying all these principles, companies are able to build long term and trust based relationships. So we have the learners, we have the strategies. So actually, up till now, we have spoken why stakeholder engagement matters and what good stakeholder engagement looks like. Now, another next question comes is how exactly we should engage with these stakeholders and at what level. So sometimes the role of the company is to keep the stakeholders informed, as we discussed in the matrix also, but other times the expectation is to listen, maybe respond, or maybe even partner. So these are the five strategies on the slide, which represents how to engage with the stakeholders in different circumstances. So first is informative engagement. This is where company proactively share the information about performance, decisions, or changes. There is no feedback loop built in, but the discipline lies in being timely, accurate, and consistent. This form of engagement often shapes how predictable and trustworthy an organization appears. Next is consultative engagement. So here, companies actively seek input before finalizing decisions. Stakeholders are encouraged to share their views and concerns so that their inputs generally shape the decisions. While decision-making authority remains with the leadership only, but the quality of the decision improves because they are grounded in stakeholder insights. Next, we have collaborative engagement, where engagement moves beyond input to a co-creation. In this kind of a strategy, stakeholders work alongside the company to design solutions, initiatives, or programs, maybe. Responsibilities shared and outcomes are shaped jointly. Next is responsive engagement, which is triggered when stakeholder raises issues, complaints, or concerns. So the focus here is not just listening, but responding with seriousness and ownerships. So board often underestimate how much trust is built or lost in an organization. When something goes wrong. Then we have transformational engagement. This is where companies and stakeholders work together to drive long-term change that benefits both the sides and sometimes the wider ecosystem also. So this type of engagement is strategic, future-oriented, and closely aligned with sustainability, ESG, and long-term value creation. So we have some examples of these strategies, but I would request you if you can just try what can be example for each of these strategies. What can be the example of informative engagement? How companies should apply for informative engagement? Through which channel, maybe through which mode? Facebook these days. Okay. This is actually a bit informal, but yes, can be informative. Media, LinkedIn. Okay.
Can you repeat your question, Bhavya? Sorry.
Yes. So these are the five strategies which we discussed. What can be channel, mode, what can be any other example uh, through which we can have this informative engagement through portals, business medias. Okay.
Yeah. Uh,
Or maybe
professional con
some other examples.
yeah, professional
Maybe.
working context. It could be a Teams meeting. It could be virtual meetings we can do. Would that serve as example?
Okay. Can we do it through some document, uh, maybe press releases, or we have to be informative, and we have to be informative with all the stakeholders. Team meeting means with
Oh,
the employees only.
yes. So it would be,
Should
the
we
town
should we
hall.
say should we say something like Apple Developer Conference or something like that, where we engage with wider
Conference. Okay.
stakeholder and give the view of the company or the what do you call it,
Can be.
roadmap for the company.
Yeah.
Can be.
Yeah. Town
Okay,
halls,
maybe
webinar. Yeah.
town halls. Okay. For consultative engagement, you can give all examples for all the strategies together, and then we will show you what can be the examples for
We
these
can.
type of strategies. You may write in the chat box also
Yep.
for all the 5 strategies, like Anil wrote. Consultative engagement, employee feedbacks on effectiveness of management communication. Yes. Uh, then collaborative engagement.
These are working sessions, like I can think of with the stakeholders, right?
Okay. Then responsive engagement.
That would be one-on-ones, maybe, or maybe via email we are addressing concerns. So that's something I've seen.
One responsive engagement we learned in corporate governance session also, if someone
Yep.
remembers. I've given you hint, learners. Learners, can we try for the responsive engagement? I've given you one hint, which is one topic which we have discussed in corporate governance session. This can be your revision also.
And these could be, I'm just thinking loud, maybe I'm missing the information, but this could be under a HR 360-degree feedback process, right? This is where one-on-one
Okay.
with the managers can go through a whole route with the HR, then we'll get.
What was the concept, if you remember? You
Oh,
uh, you are actually going in the right direction, but what was that concept, Sandeep, if you remember?
I missed that session, Bhavya, to be honest, but I'm just sharing
Okay,
my
okay.
experience. Yeah.
Please go through the recording. Then
Yeah,
maybe transformational engagement. What do you think, learners? What can be examples for transformational engagement?
yeah. Usually when we do transformation programs, we do define a governance escalation path, right? So it goes from
Okay. Yes.
one-on-one managers to next level of their leaders, where suppose if you're my manager, I have my one-on-one with you. If
Mm.
I'm not able to reach at consensus, I'll go one level up. And sometimes those feedbacks are directly shared with the HRs. Then we have meetings with the HRs. So it's like a multi-layer governance structure in place to address
Yes,
concerns.
you are actually mixing, you are actually giving example where we can have, where we are touching 2 strategies, which is
Yeah,
responsive and transformational.
yeah,
Okay, let's not waste more time. Kirat, can we have the answers? So examples for informative engagement, which can go to the public at large, can be financial reports for the investors, but suppose in listed companies, it goes to the public at large, then project progress updates for the members, then prior notices for the customers when products are recalled. Then for consultative engagement, we have serving employees on workplace policies, holding forums before launching a new facility, then consulting suppliers on the procurement processes. Then collaborative engagement is employees participating in designing of new system, customers involved in fast testing of new products, local governments and businesses co-developing projects such as CSR. Then we have responsive engagement, addressing employee complaints. I was talking actually about the whistleblower mechanism, which we discussed in second session, corporate governance. Then for transformational, we can have joint sustainability initiatives, industry-wide collaboration to set new standards or best practices. Okay, so now to explain next step, I would request my colleague Yoshita to take it forward. So over to you, Yoshita.
Yeah, thank you, Bhavya, for explaining the steps. I think maybe we can go to the next slide where we'll cover fostering effective communication. A key area where we need to focus. And so far, we have spoken about identifying stakeholders, understanding their expectations, and planning engagements. And it was really insightful to hear about your experiences and your thoughts as well. But we want to also focus on one aspect, and we would love to hear your thoughts on the communication part as well, because of course there will be no right or wrong. We'll just learn from everybody's perspectives and understand their logics behind how communication could work in a better manner. And so I just want you to introspect and think about the last time you sent a message that did not land as expected. Say anything that would have gone wrong. It could be the message, it could be the channel, or it could be the timing. So that's what we're going to unpack here. What effective communication really means. And this step is about moving towards impact from intent, and how our engagement actually lands with the stakeholders of an organization. So let's start by understanding the concept first of effective communication. And we can maybe move to the next part where we understand in the next few slides, we will be focusing majorly on the purpose of effective communication, the common channels used across various industries, and strength and the strategies that we'll understand from you as well. How would you communicate if you were put in such situations? So first, of course, effective communication, not a huge concept, but it is just a timely or a transparent process where it has to be purpose driven. While an easy concept to understand, in practice a very difficult theory to apply. It is a skill that takes your organization a long way. And as previously stated, it ensures that stakeholders understand not only what the organization is doing, but why as well. So, when communication effectively works well, it strengthens the confidence in leadership and decision making. And when it doesn't, even good decisions can be questioned or misunderstood. And this gap between intent and interpretation is what organizations today are struggling with. And that will bring us to the real world challenges the organizations are facing. On your screen, if you can see here, the common challenges that we have listed out, wherein the different stakeholder groups, there could be, because of different stakeholder groups, there could be different conflicts that may arise, of course, because certain situations may be beneficial for certain stakeholders but not for others. So you have to communicate in that situation very effectively. And of course, lack of two-way dialogue, wherein you are only just speaking up and not letting the stakeholders of your organization add value to your decisions as well. But because it is extremely important, decisions taken in isolation may not have all the perspectives. So and of course, inconsistent messaging across channels. This majorly would focus on social media, would focus on regulators, both taken together, and of course internal communication as well, because there has to be consistency across all these channels. You cannot post something on the website, something else on the say if you're a listed company on a stock exchange website, and in the annual reports of the organization, as a formal document that many stakeholders, and especially more specifically regulators and investors and your lenders, would use to effectively understand your organization. So now let us understand, if communication is this complex, the next question naturally would be, how do we choose the right way to communicate? Which will bring us to the common channels. Uh, the common channels, we have listed out four major headings. Of course, the sub channels are defined as well, and what for whom they are common for. So there is no best channel, and the right channel will depend on the stakeholder and the message. That is something that we would want to highlight here. Say for sensitive or high impact decisions, direct or interpersonal channels would be working the best. because they allow nuances and trust. For geographically dispersed stakeholders, say digital channels would help scale communication because they would require extra clarity. There's no personal touch at that stage. So the only personal touch that you could have is through digital channels. So you would have to uh, understand how to scale that communication effectively. Next would be your formal channels. Of course, formal channels would be that are regulated by the regulators. That would be your annual reports, your uh, earning calls that are periodically, for example, in India, it is periodically prescribed for certain entities, earning calls for listed entities. They are transcribed as well, and those transcripts are also need to be published on the website of the company. So this how what this does is it establishes credibility. And while these, and also in case of informal channels also, of course there is long term trust and credibility with the communities. So these are say community meetings, focus groups, CSR events, local forums and partnerships. This would be more beneficial when you want to interact with the society and the community at large. So in that case you could choose the informal channels. So quickly, let us understand from you. You can unmute yourself. Feel free to share your experiences where these channels could have benefited you, or you would think this is just an interactive this thing that I want to understand from your experiences. What could be the best channels that you have noticed in your experience in terms of organization? Uh, I suspect this is an ideal framework for fostering effective communication, right? The question is how many organizations really do it. So, see, many organizations, for example, if I talk about formal and structured channels, definitely this is regulated. The regulators, the shareholders are. It is common for the regulators and shareholders. Annual reports, ESG reports, the proper guidelines are prescribed for this. Earning calls. See, now that we're moving towards sustainability, ESG, which is your environmental, social, and governance. So society at large, it is your social responsibility. It is as a corporate citizen, you have to give it back to the society in terms of uh, interacting with them as well, not just in terms of course investing in other things, other parts of the society that is helpful. So earnings, by conducting earning calls, many companies, many listed organizations have a practice of conducting those earning calls and answering the questions regarding the financials and their balance sheets and PNLs as well. And then it goes for press releases. Many types of press releases, like for shareholders it is prescribed, and few are of course taken up by the companies voluntarily. Then if we go for direct and interpersonal channels, considering the best practices, considering that the feedbacks nowadays are taken seriously, digital media is prevalent in such situations. So the companies are also taking voluntary steps to conduct such one-on-one meetings and take them seriously, not just conduct it for the sake of it, but actually take actions on the inputs of the stakeholders as well. So of course it goes for other groups as well, for the digital medias and for the informal channels. So I hope this answers your questions, Priya. Thank you. All right. So moving on. So one, I want to also share one recent example, which is amendment in the Indian listing regulations, which is also highlighting what Pierre has asked. So this is one thing called rumor verification. This is regulated by by SEBI in India, wherein in case there is a rumor in the market and it is affecting the price fluctuation of a listed entity, up and down both, then that entity needs to verify that. And so here I would say that the industry is also understanding that there could be a lot of chatter in and around what is happening in an organization. And so we have to figure out the truth as well, right? So this is where the regulator enters to manage the situation and to give an opportunity to the organization to communicate, but again, effectively. So I would just on a lighter note say that let us not let misunderstandings get in the way yet again. Let's make an organization's life easier and follow the phrase communication is after all the key. So we just need to identify and find the right key for the right log, and it will open the doors to success. So for the communication channels, I would want to now move to the strategies. So now that we have talked about success, let us look at understanding some globally recognized strategies. Um, Again, first is inform, consult. We've already discussed about this in the past slides as well. We have involve, collaborate, and empower. So here in our experience, what we have noticed is that most organizations are very good at informing. Very few are good at, not very few, but yeah, fewer are good at consulting as well. But very few reach the stage of collaboration and empowerment, usually due to fear of losing control. So while we have touched upon farming and consulting, I would like to focus more about on collaboration and empowerment. A quick scenario where a company runs multiple collaboration workshops where employees and managers jointly redesign a new operational process. So ideas here are discussed openly. There are sticky notes everywhere. Everyone is feeling involved here. However, once the design phase ends, all the decisions revert back to senior management. Teams must seek approvals for even the minor changes, and no one has the authority to adapt the process on the ground. So, I think many of us would have been able to relate to this example in their own different ways, in their own different experiences, because it is a very common example of disempowerment, I feel. So the result here would be that the engagement will drop, implementation will be slow, employees will feel that collaboration was only symbolic and not resulting in anything else. So one has to structurally collaborate with stakeholders and empower them to contribute in a way that mutually benefits, as what matters is being clear with stakeholders and about where they stand and what is the impact of their input in the organization. Because without that them seeing the impact, just merely uh, taking inputs from them is not going to benefit the organization, and it is anyway ultimately going to create frustration in the stakeholders as well. Which brings us to and this activity, we have a quick activity where we have different choices. Just we just want to understand again different perspectives here and communication styles, no right or wrong again. So please drop your answers, and or you can feel free to unmute and discuss if you want to share any experiences. um, first question would be, which channel do you think is most effective for important messages in your experience? Would it be digital communication, direct meetings? Depends on the stakeholder, if you feel, and if you can highlight on, say, you can give 2 or 3 examples of the stakeholders and the communication channels that could prove to be effective, or formal reports. Let's go one by one. Okay, Nilesh is saying formal reports, digital communication. Great. Anil is saying depends on the stakeholders. Maybe we can throw some more light on the depends on the stakeholders part. I would like to understand some of your perspectives, 2, 3 examples if you can give. Anyone can unmute and give their examples. Digital communication.
I would say direct meetings would be the most effective channel of communication for important messages.
All right. And I just want to understand from which stakeholders' point of view are you mentioning direct meetings?
It doesn't matter, starting from senior leadership all the way to the someone who is doing at a junior management. I think if we want to have a direct communication or the direct meetings means Maybe a C-suite can have a direct meetings with their one level down, conveying the messages. And the same approach is being followed by functional leaders to the managers or directors and managers by their team members. Anytime we send any digital communication, I bet 90% of the folks don't even look at it or click on those links, right? So
Yeah.
the only way effective communication works when you have a face-to-face or a virtual meeting with your core group, and that information is directly moving from top to bottom. That's the effective way.
Got
So
it. So,
Sandeep,
Mhm.
if we have the stakeholder,
Mhm.
maybe for a listed company, we have shareholders who are the public.
Mhm.
How you will communicate with them? How you will have
Oh,
a direct meeting with them?
then update your website. If I have
Okay.
money invested in your company, I will look at it. But if
Hmm.
just for the sake of reading many reports, sits up there for years and no one clicks at them, right? So I think on a good faith, as a standard practice for the corporate, people do put everything on their corporate websites as the information available to the general public, right?
Or maybe through stock exchange also for listed
Yes.
companies. So it
Whatever.
depends on the stake. So it depends on C point, depends on the stakeholder.
Yes,
Yeah.
internal
Uh,
only. Right.
Yoshida, you can carry.
yeah, so to add on to Sandeep's point as well, I feel, yeah, correct. Digital communication could be from, sorry, direct meetings from the point of view of the stakeholders that you mentioned. I could classify them as internal stakeholders.
Yeah.
And from internal stakeholders' point of view, definitely this is one of the best channels because it is easy, I think, to directly conduct those meetings rather than having, say, digital communications. Or say, of course, if it's a remote working situation, if it's something like that, then that is a different scenario altogether. But yeah, definitely, in that case, we can say uh, your internal, specifically to internal stakeholders, we could say direct meetings as well. All right. So so we can go to the next one. Where do you draw the line on transparency? An interesting one. Disclose everything as per the regulatory requirements. Disclose in spirit. Disclose selectively, and disclose when asked. So unless saying disclose everything as per the regulatory requirements.
Yeah. A option is safe.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely safe option. Disclose regulatory. Okay. All right. So I would also like to highlight here that on some in some ways even the regulators are quite open here, wherein they also expect the companies. Of course, it's all in best practices. Regulatory, as Sandeep rightly said, is safe. But sometimes I feel that from my own experience, what we have seen is that you can also sometimes focus on disclosing in spirit. It is, of course, it brings you a level, it gives you an edge as an organization, and helps you being in a position that is a little more higher than the others. So of course both regulatory and spirit can work. Depends on the information that is being disclosed as well. All right. Next could be, which communication channel do you feel most comfortable using? So this is now from your end. Which one do you think that is the most useful? One-on-one, formal written disclosures, emails or digital channels, public forums or town halls?
See.
Sandeep has already given the answer
Email,
with respect to the first point, right,
Yeah.
Sandeep?
Yeah.
emails or digital channels. All right. So you feel that emails or digital channels are the way that you would want to, okay, communicate.
Yeah. Because
Many of them. Yeah.
I'm just sharing my experience again.
Yes, please.
People don't feel comfortable showing their face, right? If it's a mass communication going out, right? And then people, again, for the external customers, any organization announcing something, they will never have any leader addressing that concern. They use word as a we, and we is a group, and then emails and digital. I'm a big four child. Sorry, I'm thinking that way, right? So
No, definitely. Understood, taken your point,
Yeah.
and that is actually true. Many companies, many internally, if you see, many companies do use a channel, say digital channels or emails for communication. But if say you are external, you are a stakeholder of an organization, then what do you feel should be the right channel for you from outside the organization?
Usually,
Depends
we are
on.
also getting answers in the chat
Yes,
box.
so mostly everybody is mentioning C. Arnab is mentioning depends on the conversation, public communication, email, important to that individual or group one to one, is subject to the type of organization. If firing, then 6 a.m. emails are the best. All right. This is quite interesting. All right. Understood, taken your points, and thank you for highlighting. These are all different perspectives that we would want to understand from you. So the next is which stakeholder group it's a, which stakeholder group is most often informed after the decisions are made. We have employees, regulators, communities, or minority shareholders. Communities. All right. So here I would also like to highlight one point. Of course, engaging with employees at this stage is extremely important. In addition to that, regulators, of course, are not informed at the last because um to highlight, I think someone in the chat has written regulators, but if you see, there are guidelines for prior intimations as well for certain decisions. Of course, it depends on the type of decision as well. These questions are quite subjective to the decisions that are being taken up, but there are certain decisions which require prior intimation. For example, if they're related to your financials, if they're related to your dividends, if they are related to any fundraisings, for that matter. So in such cases, these are also important. All right, so it was quite an interesting conversation. Now, I think we can move on to the next step, which is stakeholder engagement and decision making. And this will, of course, in at this stage, stakeholder engagement will move from dialogue to decision quality. And we'll see the global strategies here on the next slide, wherein you can see the effective global strategies. I will take you back to business management days when we were hearing the words in every college lecture: people, planet, profit, which is your triple bottom line. These words are now transformed and a decade later turned into environment, social, and governance (ESG), primarily focusing on investors, lenders, regulators, and vendors. The next would be your RSAI and rapid matrix, wherein your responsible, accountable, and consulted and informed. This we have already discussed. So, who is responsible and accountable? Organizations have to classify that, and then to rapidly escalate the decision making as well, we have to classify who is going to take the decisions. So there has to be a comprehensive system for an organization's success. They have to link the bigger picture choices to detailed task oriented ownership as well, ensuring accountability and smooth workflow. Next is your multi-criteria decision analysis. This is a very structured decision-making approach that helps choose the best option among many alternatives by evaluating them against several conflicting areas. So this is most beneficial in cases of competing interests where 2-3 stakeholders are involved and you have to manage the conflicts. So this is where you have to, of course, sometimes there could be situations where you can make trade-offs, but managing those trade-offs and communicating the clearly to the stakeholders where with the group that is at a loss is extremely important as well, and to highlight the reasons of that loss as well. So the last one and the most important one is the materiality assessment. This is a fairly recent term. This I will link it to ESG, wherein often it is an enabler of a successful sustainability strategy. um, because it will help us identify the most critical issues on a department level as well. So, say if we take an example of a manufacturing concern, or any other IT or any FMCG company, each sector, each industry could have their own materiality areas where they need to focus. Not every sector could have the same areas. So by identifying these critical areas, these issues, the company assesses itself on the ESG parameters and sets out its sustainability goals. Which brings us now to our final and most critical question for the board. Are these decisions consistently aligned with our long-term strategy and stakeholder expectations? So now I will move on to strategic alignment with stakeholders, which is our next step, which is where it will become a leadership and governance responsibility, very most important focus area for all the group that is here for the session here. So now I want you to imagine a scenario where you have identified, mapped, and chosen the communication channel, but you have missed the alignment with the risks and expectations of each stakeholder category. Sometimes you either consider it too late or don't consider it at all. So what happens now? Now you'll end up in a pickle. This is where we'll understand the concept of stakeholder alignment. Now, let us understand what it involves: uniting the goals, interests, and expectations of the stakeholders without losing sight of the organization's long-term goals. And what does it look like in practice? So, first is your stakeholder expectations are considered early. This is the shift from informing them late to informing them early and involving them early before the decisions are locked in. There's no point in involving them after you have made up the decisions. It is only imposing the decisions and not involving them at all. So, this will also prevent resistance at the later stage. You can all reflect on your own experiences where you felt that, see your stakeholder expectations as, say, any employee or an investor, or any category that you fall into, say a community. You were informed at the end, after taking the decisions, and not early. So the next is that your business goals have to be linked with the value creation. Who does it create value for and how? Ultimately, if the business goals don't end up adding value to the stakeholders, it will create mistrust and lost confidence. Next, trade-offs between stakeholder interests are intentionally managed. So conflicting interests here are, of course, inevitable. So you have to say, for example, I'll give you a quick example here. Now, if you are an investor, or compared to you are an environmental activist or a community, as an investor, you would want that the company earns highest possible profits. But as an environmentalist, you would want that the company minimizes the harm to the environment, right? So now what will the management do in this case? So the management has to be intentional. A company might choose to use only recycled plastics, for an example, or invest in new eco-friendly technologies, which increases short-term costs, but in the long term, it is sustainable. It will, of course, better their public image, long-term brand loyalty, and conscious customers, and potential regulatory benefits as well. The last is the engagement is ongoing and two-way. Of course, this is you cannot just stop at the initial level. You have to. It is a continuous process, and we also have the common mistakes that we'll be covering on the next stage as well. So we can move on maybe to the next slide, where we understand the common mistakes nowadays that are made by the companies. So now, if alignment is so valuable, why does it fail in practice? Do you want to unmute yourselves and maybe discuss some experiences, say where you feel that you have experienced common alignment failures, where communication was not effectively made or not strategically aligned with the business goals? It would be great to hear your thoughts. All right. So you can
Okay.
feel free to, yeah.
I can talk about it a little bit. So I think alignment fails at multiple levels. Communication plays a very important role. So it could be even within the internal stakeholders like employees, when when business is creating a vision, 10 years vision, and if that vision is not communicated with everyone within the business, then there could be a misalignment. uh, the people who are supposed to, the operating team who is supposed to actually execute the vision, may not understand if it is not well communicated and repeatedly communicated. So that is one example of alignment failures. Then sometimes, like we have also observed businesses where we have directors who have very limited involvement in the day-to-day operations of the business, and suddenly now we are living in a world of social media, so people come to know about things about their own organization from social media. So those are some very good examples of alignment failures. So a couple of
Yeah.
things to add there. Yeah.
No, that's actually true. We have also experienced these things in the real world, and in the corporate world, these things are very regularly happening as well, especially when it comes to both directors and employees, both examples rightly stated. And I would also build upon this that these are not uncommon mistakes, these are very common mistakes. Some organizations may also make these mistakes with good intentions, not bad intentions. Maybe they did not intend to do something. But so here I would also highlight that the difference between high performing organizations and the rest of the organizations could be how consciously these are managed. Say, for example, you stated the directors knowing about uh, certain discussions happening in the organizations from the social media and not actually during the board meeting. That is something that needs to be effectively managed. And in fact, if it has unconsciously also happened, not with a bad intention, malicious intention, maybe in the next subsequent board meetings, taking those up. And also this builds upon the fact that we have been stating in the previous sessions, that the directors also need to highlight these and speak up and have the courage to point these things out in the board meetings as well.
That is correct. Yeah. Yeah. Rightly said. Thanks, Yoshida. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, usually probably I can talk about one area engaging too late is the employee variable pay at the end of the performance cycle, right? So most of the organizations typically have the goal setting and performance targets getting decided at the beginning of the financial year or the calendar year.
Yeah.
But most of the organizations few years back used to have the employee assessments at a team level or at a management level at the end of the performance cycle, most of them. And there never used to be a kind of a feedback loop in between because the year has passed. There were certain performance targets at the beginning of the year, but you are actually giving the feedback to the employees only at the end of the year, right?
Yeah.
So it was, in my opinion, it was like a engaging too late. And I think many of the organizations have realized that, and that is how they have started either a quarterly performance
Yeah.
feedback or quarterly performance review or the mid-year performance review. So at least the employees have an option, right, to fine tune their performance goals depending on the changes in the organization priorities, and also to make sure that the management or the immediate supervisors or managers, the expectations are also taken care of
Correct.
in the performance cycle, right? So that's,
Yeah.
in my opinion, I think it was getting too late at the end of the year, and many of the organizations have incorporated
Yeah.
that
And
feedback.
and we also see that maybe many managers, many leaders have also started having those informal one-on-one conversations as well. In addition to, of course, your formal mid-year reviews and year-end reviews. That is really correctly highlighted, and all of us would be able to relate to that as
Absolutely.
well.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you so much for
Can
sharing.
I just add one more example?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, with the recent, it was in news all over about this Amazon firing.
Hiring.
and the CEO's comment was a very has actually gone viral, the ND, and about like this is about the AI integration strategy that we have thought about it, and we are actually scaling down on the people who have not learned AI or who are not fit to the new strategy. What I get in the industry, they talk about like it may not have been the sudden move that you have tried all the strategy towards AI, or whether the people down the line they were informed at time or communicated at time with the vision of or the vision of the company changing into the different mode. So I believe there is a process which could not have been followed in this side. And exactly the same thing happened with the TCS and many other companies. So this is a very gray area where the companies are not exactly explaining why the employees have been actually told at the right time or communicated well. So maybe this can come under this the alignment
Yeah,
pitfalls.
definitely. I think that would also, effective communication here would also enable, if not all, many employees in skill upgradation at some stage in case they knew, in case they had this, vision in their mind that the company is going for, say, an AI integration or an AI introduction in their organization on a larger level, or probably the company itself had conducted certain town halls or say one-on-one sessions with the employees for those upgradations. It would have definitely benefited. And also effective communication here is lacking, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing your insights here. It was really helpful, and I hope all other learners are also benefiting from such discussions. So building on this, I think we have already covered many of the alignment failures some or the other way. So of course, silence should not, we should not be silent. We should not engage too late. Fund size doesn't fit all. Don't ignore or avoid dissent, and just close the feedback loops, even if it is a no or a yes. So now maybe we can move on to one major slide that we want to cover here is board versus management response.
Yoshida, can you just throw some light on the last point, open feedback loop? Why you consider that as a pitfall, and can you just give some example there?
Yeah, definitely. For open feedback loops, I would maybe give an example here, very, very small examples that you have to acknowledge. Say, if you're an organization, as a customer, you are sending certain requests, certain issues or queries to an organization, and they're not responding to you as a stakeholder. In those cases, for example, if I take a very from a statutory standpoint, also, if I take an investor's example of a listed company, an investor has reached out to a listed company for some queries regarding their share certificates, for that matter. So in this case, if you do
Okay, so
not,
it's not closing the feedback that is coming in from the stakeholder, right? And
it
that's what
is
you said.
actually it is it is an open feedback loop is the pitfall.
Okay, so it has not
Closing
been
is
closed.
the
Okay.
result. Yeah, correct. You have to close the feedback loop.
Got
Yeah.
it. Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so moving on. So first we'll go to board sets the direction. Of course, then management has to execute it. And we'll also cover these maybe in the strategies, a very famous example that we want to share here. Engaging early versus engaging late. All of these are already covered, how to guide trade-offs, manage trade-offs, who has to do what. You can, of course, go through this slide, and we'll be happy to take up any questions later on as well. And we can move on and see the global regulatory frameworks. I will be covering the strategic alignment through an example in the subsequent slides in the interest of time. So now we move on to the global regulatory framework on stakeholder engagement. So this would mark as a shift from practice to frameworks. Across the world, stakeholder engagement is no longer viewed as voluntary or formal. It has been embedded in laws. And of course, that is how we are moving to a stakeholder-centric environment. From India perspective, if we see, we have a proper stakeholder relationship committee in place, which is a board delegated committee, and it is legally mandated for companies having 1,000 plus security holders at any time during a financial year. The major role is of this committee is actually beyond compliances. It is a mechanism, strategic mechanism, to build trust, transparency, and long-term value creation. Basically, all the focus of this committee would be majorly on recording investor grievances, being ensuring that the investor grievances are answered to. If transfers have taken up effectively, dividends have been paid off within due timelines, or any complaints from the investors or stakeholders have been addressed to or not. So somewhere ESG also is becoming a part of the agenda item for this particular meeting. So this is one which acts like a governance tool. The next would be your accountability standards, your accountability 1000 stakeholder engagement standards, which could be widely considered the leading and most applied global standards for high quality and stakeholder engagement. It provides a framework for organizations of all types and sizes to integrate stakeholder management into their governance strategy and operations. And in essence, it turns stakeholder engagement from an activity into governance backed strategic discipline. You can go through all the principles here. We have inclusivity, materiality, responsiveness, continuous improvement, and integration with governance and strategies. All of these are, of course, whatever steps we had explained in the past slides are based on these stakeholder engagement standards itself. So taken together, all these frameworks show that effective stakeholder engagement today is governed, structured, measurable, and strategic. And it is not just an ad hoc activity that you will take up as and when it is convenient for you. Now, here I want to move from concept to reality, from theory to practice, where we have in the past slides explained strategic alignment as well. And we'll have real people, real interest, and real trade-offs happening here. Every organization reaches a point where stakeholder alignment stops being a slide deck topic and becomes a business necessity. And I will walk you through a real-world scenario that shows this transition. So let us understand a successful stakeholder strategy that was taken up by, as an illustration, we are explaining how a leading FMCG company has developed and implemented a comprehensive strategy to identify, engage, and collaborate with its stakeholders. So at the outset, leadership recognized that success would not come from scale alone. It would actually depend on how well the company is understood and engaged with its stakeholders. So you can take any top 1000 entity in India, you can open the BRSR report from the annual report section and go through the top stakeholders that are defined. You can see their communication strategies, and that's where we also, of course, extract these informations from. So now here they began by clearly defining who the stakeholders were, which is a mandatory principle under the BRSR report as well, where any group impacted by the company's operations or capable of influencing the outcomes has to be identified. Now, these included employees, suppliers, distributors, communities, and regulators, not just customers and investors. Next came the engagement approach. Instead of a one-way communication, the company created open channels for dialogue, regular meetings, workshops, structured feedback mechanism. This wasn't just about announcing decisions, it was actually about listening before deciding. So insights from stakeholders were then used to shape strategy, validating the performance, highlighting the risks, and uncovering new opportunities, which led to a tailored engagement strategy for different groups rather than one size fits all approach that we have been discussing. What was the result? The result was stronger trust and mutual respect, better collaboration, and continuous improvement rather than just reactive fixes upon situations being happening. So a quick takeaway here would be that an effective stakeholder engagement looks like this when it is intentional, it is structured and aligned with proper strategy on both management and board level as well. Now, one more strategy that we want to cover in terms of internal and external stakeholder alignment is that we have, so this company has identified a large group, uh, and this is a large organization with the best approach that we could identify. Here, the board did not manage day-to-day engagements. Instead, directors were trained to understand stakeholder impacts, set expectations, and oversee how stakeholder considerations influenced key decisions. Now, day to day engagement was rightly delegated to management, while major issues were escalated to the board. So, it is extremely important to understand that this delegation is critical here. The board cannot do everything, and the management cannot do everything. The executor and the decision maker has to be different. And the company embedded stakeholder engagement into its risk management process, especially human rights and supply chain due diligence. Stakeholder feedback helped identify risks early, track projects, and measure real world impacts, not just assumptions. So, in a sense, the company used a top down approach wherein the board and the management had their responsibilities separated, and a bottom up approach as well, that underpinned by strong governance and transparent communication to balance diverse stakeholder interests with its long term vision. So, with this, we come to the close of the stakeholder engagement section. We hope this discussion has sparked new perspectives, which I'm sure it has because we have had fruitful discussions. And I just want to leave you with one practical takeaway in this section. Uh, just one learning. Of course, maybe you can state this learning at the end of the session as well in the chat box. That one learning that you would take back for your organization from the approaches that we have shared today. So now this takes us to another section. A very important stakeholder that we have to identify here is the investor relations segment, defining the stakeholder, that is investors. So we'll quickly understand who an investor is before we go deeper into the investor relations section. So, at its core, investor is anyone who commits to capital to an organization with the expectation of earning returns, right? It should be strategic, financial, even social. So, if you look at the center of the slide, we have defined the investors here. We have retail investors like you and me. We are everyday individuals. We have that 50, 30, 20 rule of savings where we invest a part of our savings into, say, shares, mutual funds, etc. We are institutional investors, which we manage large pool of capitals, while corporate strategic investors look beyond pure financial returns. So corporate or strategic investors invest not just for returns, but for access, technology, markets, capabilities, anything that is more majorly for expansion. Then you have government investors, which bring long-term public interest perspectives into picture. Finally, foreign investors, which are individuals, companies, or institutions from one country that invest capital into businesses, financial markets, or physical assets in another country, seeking returns, growth, or strategic advantage. So the key takeaway here is that investors are not a single homogeneous group. There could be many types of investors with different expectations, time horizons, and influences. So again, there has to be a different approach for each investor for the relations to continue. Now, investor relations is a department. It is a strategic management function, not just a communication role, that ensures again that whatever the company is doing has to be known publicly, very clearly, consistently, and credibly. It has to be understood by the capital markets and the investors. IR will actually help in positioning the company strategically and ensuring that the performance, risk, and value creation are aligned and communicated effectively. Then we'll have fair disclosure, which is again clarity on strategy and risk long-term relationships, addressing concern. All of these ultimately serve just one purpose, which is aligning market perception into business reality. So IR is not just engaging with the investors, but it is also engaging with regulators, stock exchanges, rating agencies, media, because all in all, investors are being regulated from these platforms. So now it also sits at the intersection of strategy, governance, and communication, which is critical for a stakeholder facing role, and it makes or breaks the image of an organization. Then we have OECD principles. Of course, majority of it we have already covered. This is just the principles, the regulatory framework around it. OECD, as we all know, are not mandatory. They are principles that are guidelines, or governance standards that are followed by many countries in and around the world. So here, maybe you can read this slide and you'll be able to link what we have discussed in this session today. And we can move on to the communication strategies now. These are also the regulatory frameworks, jurisdiction specific, while not covered explicitly, but the essence and the focus has been incorporated in the regulations. As you can see, for US, we have the Securities Act, we have Sarbanes-Oxley insider trading rules. For UK, we have UK listing rules, disclosures, guidelines and transparency rules, corporate governance code, EU, again, shareholder rights directives. India, we have already stated SEBI LODR, prohibition of insider trading, ICDR regulations. Then we have Australian Stock Exchange listing rules, Corporation Act. All of these, the essence somewhere or the other has been covered here. So now we can move on to the core communication strategies and key activities. So here we'll be bringing these together. If you can see on your screen on the left side, you will see 3 buckets. Financial information tells investors how are we performing, and strategic information will tell the investors where we are going, where we are leading to, the activities that we are undertaking, what is the end goal of that. Then we have governance and ESG, which tells them how responsibly and sustainably are we getting there. Because long term, of course, nowadays investors are choosing for ESG compliant and high ESG compliant entities, and investing in those areas itself. Now, here in reality, of course, investors expect all 3 consistently. At some or the other stage, they may have some mismatch. But of course, it is important to have all the 3 financial strategy governance in place. Now, if I take you through the right side, this is how that story is delivered. Say for financial information, you have your earning calls, roadshows, one-on-one meetings, reports, websites. Each will serve a different purpose, but you have to understand the message must stay aligned. That confusion should not be created in terms of information being delivered. Then if the same story will sound different across these platforms, it will create a challenge in terms of course, different numbers are reflected in the press release. Another set of numbers is reflecting in the financials. Earning calls are stating something else only. This is where indiscipline comes in, and IR discipline really matters in this case. So it is extremely important to monitor your IR function effectively. So now I would like to just step back and ask a different question. Where does the board fit in to all this? We'll just take 2 minutes extra maybe in today's session. And because this is an important section, we want to cover how board will fit in, and how board, of course, because they don't communicate daily with the investors. But at the end of the day, they are the ones that are governing everything that goes out. So you as board members would definitely, that is why this entire session, investor relations and stakeholder communication, engagement was important to cover. So here, of course, disclosure and regulatory oversight. Um, of course, it is a serious governance risk if it is selective or inconsistent. Uh, of course, the MD or the director is only signing the documents that are being shared externally with the stock exchanges. So here, there has to be that regulatory oversight also. Then the next would be your strategic alignment and investor engagement. I'm going to read both these together because here, if you see on the screen, you have to ensure that investor communication reflects strategy and long-term priorities. As we have discussed, the strategies are quite similar in terms of communication with the stakeholders. But of course, for the different investor groups, it could be different. So no one size will fit here. Then the board, of course, the board must review what the investors are saying. If not, then that would create frustration in the investors as well. Last but not the least is your market perception, risk, and ESG, most important again. And the board has to keep an eye on the market sentiments, valuation trends, crisis communication, and with the ESG, the focus shifts to long-term value. Are we telling a story that goes beyond the next quarter? It shouldn't be long, short term, it should be long term. So, to sum up here, I would say investor relations is not just about communication, it is about trust. And the management delivers the message, but the board governs the integrity, consistency, and long term credibility. So, when IR is governed well, it aligns with market perception, business reality, and that alignment is what sustains long term investor confidence. So, with this, we come to the end of our session here, and thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. If Bhavya, you want to add something, please feel free to.
No, Yoshita, it was actually very insightful, and I hope everyone enjoyed the session. So, learners, next in the next session, we'll be having a recap of all the sessions we have done, maybe for a half an hour, and then we'll be discussing about the assessment part. Yeah, thank you.
I have one
Thank you,
question.
everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, so in the portal, right, in UpGuide portal, right, thing was discussed, right, that after every session, right, the whatever the PDF, right, would be uploaded there. So once I go to their section in UpGrad, right, in the course section, I'm able to see the PDF of first two session, and
Okay.
after third, fourth, and fifth are not there. And also one more.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so if you can kindly upload those, right, that would be helpful for us to, let's say, to review, right, and also to study on ourselves. And second,
I'll speak. Yeah, Anna.
yeah, and a second thing is that means in the video, right, every video is been recorded, right? The fifth video,
Yes.
right, when I go to the past session, the fifth video, I'm not able to see the recording of that fifth video. The
Fifth video.
yeah. So if you can
Okay.
kindly check that, that would be helpful.
I'll speak with the upgrad people, and I'll request them to upload all the recordings plus the PDFs of all these texts so that you can read and understand.
Yeah, surely. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, learners. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Thank
both.
you, everyone. Thank you for
Yeah.
your